All right. Okay. Well, welcome. This is the first of a series of 10 online team meetings for the spring of 2021. And to those that have joined us live and those that will be watching this at a later date through the SC Tim Network website, glad that you could join us today. Going to go through a few things here. Next slide, Jeff, please. Who we are, why we're here. Well, this is mainly an information sharing platform and a networking platform. So all of the partners in the traffic incident management program that participate in these TIM team meetings are getting together exactly for that. We do this in the spring and we do it in the fall, and we like to discuss what's going on. What are the, how bad is it? How good is it? What are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? How can we work better together? And we add some interesting topics here, as you'll see today, in relation to what we do and why we do it and how we do it. So agencies participating today, we will have the Towing and Recovery Association from South Carolina, and then we will have the Operation Lifesaver program. We'll have an overview of that, and I'll discuss that in a couple of minutes. And I mean, there's going to be some good information that will be passed around the Towing and Recovery Association, basically working with traffic incident management in an evolving industry, and that's exactly the case. Operation Lifesaver, in the interest of safety. I mean, there are as I promote in the traffic incident management training, we need to work with our private partners, the tow industry. We need to help protect them. We're losing too many tow operators out there. I often say that a bad day is a wreck on the railway tracks. A worse day is not getting a hold of the railway company before the train comes through. So there are some important issues here, and we're going to address a little bit of that in the next hour. And then I'll finish off with a very brief presentation on an actual couple of shots in regards to what happens when the media comes in, sets up in the wrong place, what happens to the traffic, and what's the difference when they don't do that. And that's up to us. We need to develop relationships and get along great with the media people. And having been a PIO for about 10 years, I'm very familiar with that. And it's difficult because we may go to different jobs, they may go on to different jobs. So we need to maintain those relationships and keep working with them. They are another important component in this overall program. So next slide, please. So this is our spring TIM team meeting for the Myrtle Beach area, and you'll see in a minute that we've got these set up in all 10 regions around the state. We are constantly looking for suggestions for topics. I know the fall meetings, we had a presentation on public safety distracted driving that was pretty interesting, and another one from the DHEC emergency response people. We've got another couple of great topics here for these spring sessions, but if you've got something you would like to see us cover, please get in touch with us and we can certainly reach out and get these things covered. That's important that we do that. And again, we will have a series of 10 meetings in the fall of 2021, October, November-ish. They may still be online, but hopefully we'll be back face to face and we can get to know some people again on a little more personal basis. So that'll be great. Check sctimnetwork.com ongoing for updates on meetings and training dates and locations. And if your agency or your region can host a meeting in the fall of 2021, please get in touch with me and let's put that together. Next slide, please. So here's our schedule for the spring. We're obviously doing the Myrtle Beach session this morning. We'll do Florence this afternoon, and then you can see it continues tomorrow and Thursday, and then we pick it up again a week tomorrow and a week Thursday, and finish off the 10 meetings. Next slide, please. Training is picking up. As of June the 1st of last year, we received clearance to get back to face-to-face training. We did a fair amount of training between June and the end of last year. I've actually put about 255 people through the training this year since January. So we're doing a fair amount of classes. If your agency would like to host a traffic incident management training session, please contact us so that we can schedule that. That can be daytime, evening, Saturday, shift schedules. I know one agency, every Tuesday was their training day, depending on what squad. So we did training every Tuesday morning, and it worked out absolutely great for everybody. So keep checking sctimnetwork.com if you can't host a class for updates to the training locations as we add them to the calendar. The only thing we ask is 15 or more participants, no maximum. I know I've done one with 60, 65 people in the upstate. So that's not a problem as long as the facility will hold them. And until further notice, we must follow all COVID protocol during these training sessions. Next slide, please. So, as of March 29th, some of the national figures here you can see on this map of the country. Unfortunately, again, like I said, I've put about another 255 people through the training since 1st of January. There was a problem with the website, with access to the Federal Highway Administration website, and we were not able to add our numbers, our additional numbers, until about a week and a half ago. They are in there, but they're not reflected here. So we're probably getting up around 9,000 somewhere as far as total trained. Next slide, please. And this is our actual percentage as of the end of last year, 60.5. So we're probably sitting about 62, maybe a little over 62% based on the additional 250, 255. So we haven't set a goal yet for this year. Our goal last year was 60%. And even with there was some virus floating around somewhere that knocked the stuffing out of the face-to-face training program until the 1st of June, but we still managed to reach our goal, which was 60%. So we were pleased with that. I'd hate to think of where we would be if we hadn't had the restrictions on the training. But anyway, that's water under the bridge. Hopefully things are going to start picking up real well. Next slide, please. As far as Myrtle Beach and Horry County, these are the numbers. Now, I just received updated numbers this morning. So these numbers are as of the 11th, which is a couple Sundays ago. The numbers as of 2 days ago have actually gone up in a couple cases here. Horry County's not at 18. They added a couple, 20. Marion's still at 4, Williamsburg's still at 2, and Georgetown's still at 0, but Horry County has gone up a little bit, as have the worst counties. Greenville's sitting at 23 right now, so they've added 4 in a week, which is absolutely horrible. Spartanburg's actually up to 16, and Lexington has, 14. Charleston's leapfrog. They're up to 15. So, yeah, it's getting pretty bad. And that's what we're faced with. I mean, people are driving crazy as the roadways and the highways emptied out there with the virus. The speeds picked up. The speeds are still high. People got used to these high speeds, and they're driving, in some cases, driving absolutely ridiculously out there, and it's causing a lot of carnage. Next slide, please. You can see Horry County again, as of the 11th, we had 247. What are we up to as of 2 days ago? 276. But we had 247. Horry County was just about 7% of that. And then Horry, Marion, Williamsburg, Georgetown was 9 points. So almost 10% of the fatalities in our state as of April the 11th came out of these 4 counties. So it's pretty significant. And that's, unfortunately, that's just those are the facts, and this is what we're faced with. So I know I spend a fair amount of time in Horry County, and the driving, like most other places in this state, is just absolutely insane. But we've got to be careful. We have to watch our backs, and we have to watch out for each other. Next slide, please. So the 511 app, this is a little bit of an older slide, but that's okay because it still gets the same message across. 511, SCDOT 511 app is so important. I mean, anyone who hasn't got that app, they need to download it. It's a free app. It's a quick download. I mean, this says 326 cameras. I think this morning I checked it. There's 519 cameras that are up on this. message board signs. I mean, this is all real-time live stuff. We're up to, I think, 12 construction zones this morning. I think it's more like 112, but that's just my personal opinion driving around the state. It gives you incidents, congested routes, and of course the SHEP roadside assistance. I mean, if someone breaks down somewhere, you hit star HP, and it will let SHEP know if you're in a SHEP service area. If not, it will let the Highway Patrol know that where your vehicle is and that you have requested assistance. So extremely important and constantly updated 511 app that we should all make sure that we have. Next slide, please. Really pleased to pass the microphone to Anna Wingard, a good friend. She's with the Towing and Recovery Association of South Carolina, and she's going to give us a brief presentation on working with traffic incident management in an evolving industry. Anna, the mic's all yours.
Good morning, everybody. I'm sure you probably didn't anticipate to hear a female's voice as the voice of the towing industry, but that's what it is. I in no way, shape, or form will be found in the driver's seat of a tow truck, but I've been involved in this industry for many years, and I'm actually now serving as the president of the Towing and Recovery Association of South Carolina. I am with Wingard Towing Service. It is my husband's business. He is a third-generation family-owned. This is a third-generation family-owned business, Wingard Towing, and next year will be our 50th year in business. So I feel like we do kind of bring to the table where we know kind of where some of the trends are coming from, how we do things differently today than we did 10 years ago versus 50 years ago. So I kind of wanted to bring that a little bit to the table and just kind of give a general overview of how all towing services in our state are coming together through this organization to improve our industry. So just as the slide says, I really want to come here today to give a tow operator's perspective on how we're evolving and how we are really happy to collaborate in this setting. So we appreciate being involved. You can go to the next slide. So I'm probably not going to tell anybody something here that you don't really know, but this is kind of how we see things. So our ultimate goal of having a towing service involved at a wreck scene is to safely and efficiently clear the roadways so that traffic can continue flowing after an arrest, a wreck, an abandoned vehicle has been found, a private property impound, a breakdown, you name it. So by working together optimally and with you guys, with local towing service agencies, then that means that all agencies on scene can keep chaos and confusion to a minimum, as well as reduce the chances of any additional wrecks, and therefore reduce the economic burden that a major traffic congestion can cause a local community. So if you really think about it, the more we can communicate and work together and clear the scene quicker, there's less of an economic impact. There have been studies that have tied, how much money it costs everyone who's involved in the traffic if they're sitting in traffic for 30 minutes versus 3 hours. People are going to miss flights, people are going to be late to appointments, that sort of thing. And so there is some sort of a monetary outcome the better that we all work together. So next slide. So I wanted to take a minute to just, I know I represent the state of South Carolina, but we're not too much different than everybody else across the nation. So in my opinion, and most people that we've talked to in the towing industry, that we are one of the very, very few industries in the entire nation that are primarily ran by small family-owned businesses. So we've kind of quantified it at about 95%. And I say we as in, I've actually kind of had these conversations with the Towing and Recovery Association of America. So we think that approximately only 5% of towing services are run by small government-funded situations, not run by large corporations, franchises, or subsidiaries. So there really isn't like a towing service that you would find that's all across the nation. There are some, like New York Police Department does have their own towing service. So it's really that 5% where the government actually has their own towing service. But most of the time they find that that isn't profitable or doesn't really work very well. So we just feel like we're a little bit rare in that instance. So kind of when you look at us on the scene, just remember that we're not like fire, EMS, and police agencies. We're not government funded. You may have 10 towing services that are on the rotation list, but one may be a one-man, one-truck operation with a wheel lift, and one other towing service might have 20 tow trucks and have 10 that are heavy duty, 5 that are medium duty, and 5 that are light duty. So even just in our industry, we have just a vast variety of different business models. So that kind of translates into the fact that there's really no standardization on how to tow a vehicle. It's up to the business owner how he wants to run his business. So I think that that's why these trainings are really valuable to us, because it helps give us some sort of standardization across the state in order to help everybody be on the same page as to how we're supposed to do things, and who's supposed to listen to who, and who is supposed to have what roles. Next slide. So I wanted to take a moment to kind of just shed a little bit of light on how we all rely on each other. So I mentioned dispatch first because that's kind of where the process starts for us. So towing services are going to rely on dispatch to tell us more than just an incident location and address. We really are trying to work on that in our area, because a lot of times all we get in is an address, and that leads us to potentially send the wrong type of truck. So for example, if the dispatcher can give us a vehicle type, because towing a moped, while small, it's not the same thing as towing a 4-door dually Dodge Ram pickup truck that's off the side of the interstate upside down. So that kind of leads into, if there are any pertinent details that are known, if the vehicle's in the woods, in a ditch, if it was an arrest versus a wreck, if it's hanging off a bridge, we need to know those things. And of course, that sounds pretty obvious, but a lot of times the dispatcher probably doesn't have this information. So we rely on the dispatcher to get that information for us before dispatching out, or if we ask those questions, not to be upset with us, because we want to make sure that we do bring the right truck and the right driver and the right equipment so that we can clear the roadway as efficiently as possible. Something else to consider is if the dispatcher is aware of what's going on a little bit beyond the accident scene. Sometimes what happens is we get in the very traffic that the accident, or excuse me, the wreck scene has actually caused. So if the dispatcher is aware of the fact that we can go to the next exit and go in reverse all the way to the wreck scene, then that is extremely pertinent information, especially in some of these areas like in Lexington County, where we have these interesting interstate construction where you have only one lane to pass through. There's no emergency lanes or anything. So if there's a wreck, no one can pass through it. So we would need to go up to the next exit and go in reverse. So those are very, very pertinent details that help us clear the accident scene up as quick as possible. And then in the reverse, the dispatchers, they rely on us to provide accurate ETAs. I can't exactly speak for them, and I'd love to pick some of the dispatchers' brains on how we can actually help them more. But one of the main things is towing services should be able to let them know, if we're going to be there in 20 minutes versus 40 minutes. Those are very helpful information tidbits that they need to let their people on scene know. All right, next slide. So the towing services rely on the fire departments mainly and pretty obviously to block the wreck scene with their fire truck. And this is kind of a new thing too. We're actually working on this a little bit with our local fire departments, but as far as disconnecting batteries, this is happening more and more with electric vehicles. Sometimes the fire department goes ahead and does these things after a collision to prevent a fire. And sometimes they don't. And we're actually kind of working with our local fire department to see when that's pertinent, when it's not pertinent, that sort of thing. But it is something that we do rely on them sometimes to do. And then I kind of left this open for fire departments. We see a pretty wide variety of how they rely on us. I don't necessarily think they rely on us as much as maybe police do, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But they do still rely on us to clean up the accident scene, clean any glass, debris out of the roadway. Sometimes we are arriving on scene after they've used jaws of life. So anytime that there is kind of rescue efforts needed, we typically just pick up where they leave off. So there might be some information that they give us that would be helpful to us and vice versa. Next slide. All right, so I think that towing and the police departments maybe have the closest relationship here. So we heavily rely on police departments to direct traffic for us so that we can keep our eyes kind of what we call hooking and booking, which is really just like hooking up the vehicle or getting it on the flatbed and getting it out of there as soon as possible. So if police are also on scene helping keep an extra eye out, we can really just focus on our job and clean up the roadway and get away as soon as possible. Also just to dispatch us when appropriate. Just because there is a wreck scene doesn't mean a towing service is needed. And just because someone has been arrested doesn't mean a towing service is needed. So there are times where we're dispatched out and we're not needed. So it's really just up to the police department to know and have appropriate training on when we're needed and when we're not needed. Also, police departments, we need them to make sure that they're also dispatching things like the power company. We have shown up to a scene where there's a vehicle, completely lodged into a power pole and the power lines are down. So it would have been more beneficial if the police officer would have communicated with dispatch to get the power company out. Just to disconnect that before we arrive, so that could have already been, handled safely. So that's just kind of something else that we rely on the police to actually dispatch out other agencies that are necessary. And police departments, occasionally they rely on us to jumpstart cars and get people on their way as well. Unlock vehicles, we don't see it as often, but if they're not in an emergency situation and a child or an animal is locked in a car and it's, not too hot, we have been asked to come out and unlock vehicles in an effort to not break a window and less emergency situations. And then also, of course, again, police departments really, really rely on us to fully sweep the roadway of any glass and any debris so that there are no additional accidents caused by what is left at an accident scene. Nothing should be left at an accident scene. All right, next slide. All right, so this one's a kind of a unique one. We, as towing services, rarely rely on EMS departments. Most of the time, EMS is actually completely gone by the time we arrive on scene. So this one's kind of a brief one, but if there's any, a wallet or something that we've discovered at the scene and we can quickly give it to someone before they're whisked away in an ambulance, that's kind of where we would rely on them to help us out. But that's really it for EMS. You can go to the next slide. Okay, so upon arriving to a wreck scene, tow operators, we need to make sure that we kind of establish who is in command of the incident. And believe me, we don't want to be in charge of the accident scene at all. We, as mentioned before, really want to rely on the other agencies to do their jobs so that we can do ours, so that we can just focus on the vehicle and getting it out of the roadway or out of the side of the roadway. So we do feel like we are an important part of the unified command operation. We are the last to kind of clear up the scene, so we are definitely not a part of, the beginning or the middle, but we're kind of the caboose, if you will, at a wreck scene. And just as I've kind of said in multiple ways, that when everybody works together, it really creates a focus of safety and quick clearance for all of us involved. And when we start on the accident scene, that's kind of the end of, where every other agency kind of finishes and we take over. So when you see us on the scene, that's really the beginning of our work. And when we haul the vehicle off, that's again still the beginning of our work. We'll take them to the impound lot. We process vehicles, notify the last registered owners, work with insurance companies, work with police agencies. So if a towing service contacts a police officer that was on scene, a week later, sometimes, it helps us, especially if there's been a fatality, if an officer can tell us who the next point of contact is to help manage the property inside of a vehicle, those sorts of things. So yes, most everything happens at the scene, but there are occasions where we do continue to rely on those agencies after the scene has been cleared away. Next slide. So what's new? Just kind of wanted to just kind of shed a little bit of light on the fact that the towing industry has vastly changed in the last 5 to 10 years. Prior to that, there was a lot of stagnancy. In general, in the state of South Carolina, towing laws have not really changed since 1976. I actually have been speaking at the State House about 2 pertinent laws that we really are trying to change, that we've been trying to change since 2018. So yeah, that's going on 3 years. So anyway, in general, a lot of our changes in the past 5 to 10 years have been reflective of technology changes, which has been seen in a lot of industries. But basically, you'll see in most towing industries that we most all of us now have some sort of a dispatching software system that we work on. And previous to about 5 years ago, the only thing that was available to us was trucking softwares that basically towing services just kind of used and had to make work. Well, now we have softwares that are customized to us, and for our business, it completely changed our business model. And for most towing services, it has too. Some towing services, I know there's one in the upstate that they're able to give the local college access to see all the vehicles that are in their impound lot, so that the college doesn't even have to contact the towing service to see if there are vehicles in the impound lot. So just a great example of how technology is really just and data access has really improved our industry and helped everybody, not just the towing service. So if you've kind of been in this industry for a while, you might realize that we are relying less on radios and more so on the app-based programs. And so that goes and piggybacks off of the fact that we have a dispatching software. So the drivers are no longer, using pen and paper to receive calls and know where to respond. They get the information likely on an app on their phone in the vehicle. So that should help us have better response times, because the receiving end of the information is basically instant now. A lot of us also use just kind of like Jeff was talking about earlier, the 511 system to see where wrecks are. Yes, we get information from dispatch, but sometimes that can give us the actual camera information, so we can actually see where it is or see what's going on. We can also use the CAD system that South Carolina Highway Patrol has. So, the dispatcher may give us a location, but if we look on the CAD, we know that it's a fatality or a breakdown. That can kind of sometimes give us additional information. But ultimately, kind of sort of in closing here, that being included in these trainings is very valuable to our industry. And so we feel that if it's valuable to us, then it becomes valuable to all the other agencies that are responding to a wreck scene. So even in general, like I said at the beginning, training for the towing industry is very, very, very rare. So if you are involved in a police agency or a fire agency and you guys have a training at your headquarters that you feel that would be valuable to towing services, please extend the invite to them, because it really can only stand to help everybody involved. So if there are any questions, I am here to answer them. You can always get my contact information and ask me questions later. If I don't have the answer, I am very happy to reach around and try to find an answer for you. Trask represents all towing services in the state of South Carolina, so we have members everywhere that represent every kind of towing business. So if I don't have the answer, I can most likely get it for you.
Thanks, Anna. That was great. That was super. We have a chat box there. If anybody has questions, feel free to put them in the chat box and we will get them over to Anna, and we will get you some answers. So that's great. Good presentation. Next up is a lady's been a friend of mine for a while, Janice Cowan with the South Carolina Operation Lifesaver, and she has put a title here in the interest of safety, and I know that this is another really important program, so I think we're handing control over to Janice, and she's going to take the helm and take it away, Janice.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen with you. Here we go. Yeah, I am Janice Cowan. I'm the state coordinator for Operation Lifesaver, and our mission is really, quite frankly, to prevent motor vehicle train collisions as well as pedestrian train situations, so that we don't need to have the traffic incident management that you guys so beautifully are executing. We really also want to make sure that the people that are responding to these incidents are doing so in the safest manner. That can be other incidents. It's not rail incidents. We want to make sure that when you are responding to those incidents, that you are doing so in a safe manner. And towing, for instance, would be one of those situations. We want to make sure that the tow truck operator is very much aware of crossing a railroad track, the distance that they would need to go on the other side. And I'll talk about that a little bit further in just a minute. But this is the type of incident we're trying to prevent from happening. This is an Amtrak train, so as you can see, it's much lighter than the freight trains that we typically see most of the time here in South Carolina, and it did quite a lot of damage to that vehicle. And another thing to point out in this is, if you'll notice, you don't even see the road. The road is way back near the end of that Amtrak train. So these trains are so large, they have so much power behind them, they weigh so much, and they can do really unfortunate and tragic damage to the vehicle or the person that may be walking or biking along the railroad tracks. I'm going to show you a couple true stories here, unfortunately, that have happened.
Kaylin was lovable. She was the class clown. She was everybody's friend.
John was a prankster. He was the most happy-go-lucky boy I knew. He had the world in the palm of his hand.
She was very funny. She was very spontaneous. She had a bright future ahead of her. He was taken too soon.
He was 6'5", and he just had the most beautiful smile. She was beautiful, athletic, smart. I never thought that I would have to warn Kaylin that if she played her music loud, she wouldn't hear a train whistle.
Every year, hundreds of Americans are killed or seriously injured because they take risks around railroad tracks. Help us bring that number to zero. Talk to your loved ones about rail safety. Visit oli.org.
So some of those incidents were pedestrians and others were people driving, and distractions caused them not to be aware of the location that they are. And I know when we have emergency situations, people are responding, and their minds are on other things. So we want to make sure that we're reminding people that every 3 hours a motor vehicle or train is hit by a motor vehicle or a person is hit by a train, and we're just trying to prevent those things from happening. So let's talk about our numbers. 2019, we had a slight incline in our crashes. 2020 numbers are still preliminary from the Federal Railroad Administration, but I will say you can see here in our region, the FRA region that includes these states on the screen, our numbers went down drastically in 2020. And of course, we know that there were fewer people on the roadways. We only had 32 incidents last year. As the economy comes back and people are back to work and not working in their homes as often, unfortunately, I'm sure we'll see those numbers go up. As far as our trespassing numbers, last year we did also have a decline down to 15. Not as much of a decline, but we did see lower numbers in that situation. But we want to remind people that anytime is train time. Trains don't take vacations. They run 24 hours a day, every single day of the year. So if you're coming up to a crossing, you always want to make sure that you are waiting for that train. And then it seems like common sense, but it's really something people don't think about, is the fact that a train can't swerve. They can't go left, they can't go right to avoid something that's on the tracks in front of them. So we want to make sure that everyone is being reminded that it's in our hands as motorists or cyclists or pedestrians to make sure that we're stopping for the train if you see or hear one approaching. And those trains can't stop quickly. Trains take a long way to stop, as you can imagine. They're very heavy. Your average car can stop in about 200 feet, a bus about 230, a truck about 300 feet, which is the equivalent of one football field. Your passenger train, such as Amtrak, about 2 football fields or 600 feet. But our average freight trains, the ones that we do see most of the time in South Carolina, take over 5,280 feet, which is more than a mile or more than 18 football fields. So we know that they just can't swerve to avoid a collision. They can't stop quickly. So it really falls in our hands to make sure that we are staying out of the path of the train and looking and listening before crossing that track. And we mentioned that they can't stop quickly because they're very heavy. There's a weight ratio of 2,000 to 1 when it comes to the weight of a train and a car, and that's the same as a car is to a soda can. So you know the visual representation there of what happens when you drive over a can, and we just don't want that impact on any vehicle, and certainly it would be even worse on a bicycle or motorcycle or person. So here is a truck, which is generally a larger vehicle on the roadway that could do certainly damage if it was involved in another crash with another vehicle. But involved in a crash with a train, you can see how devastating that can be to the truck itself. And again, if you look down the train on the left-hand side, you can see the roadway and see how far the train pushed that truck. The weight ratio there is very evident, and how much power that train has. So there's just no match when it comes to a motor vehicle and a train. So we try so hard to make sure people are aware of how important it is to be safe at crossings. This is one of the things that we're really focusing on now in railroad safety, and that is what to do in an emergency. What is the plan in case you do have a problem on or near the railroad tracks? Similar to having a fire escape plan that you would teach your children. Where do you go? How do you get out in case of a fire in your home? So we are making sure, especially with young drivers, that we're teaching them what to do in case of an emergency. So if you're stuck or stalled on the tracks, we want you to get out of your vehicle immediately, whether you hear a train coming or not. And this is very important for our dispatchers, law enforcement, and others to know so that they can tell the citizens in their communities, get out first. Don't worry about calling 911 yet. Get out of your vehicle. Get yourself to a safe location. If a train is approaching, you want to actually run towards the train at a 45-degree angle. And I know that seems unusual to a lot of people, but the debris field would be on the other side where the train is going. So you want to make sure you don't get hit by parts of your own vehicle. So run towards the train, but out at a 45-degree angle from that track. Now, if you are stuck or stalled on the tracks and you do not think there's a train approaching, all crossings in the United States now have an E and S sign, which is the Emergency Notification System sign. This sign is a blue and white sign. It will have a 1-800 number on it. This particular sign says a lot of fives. That is just an example. That's not on every crossing. Each number will be dependent on which railroad owns that crossing and which one has trains operating in that location. So make sure you call the 1-800 number posted on that crossing sign at that particular crossing, and then give them the DOT crossing number underneath. It's 6 numbers and 1 letter. That is somewhat like the physical address for the crossing itself. That is a crossing number that is unique to that location. No other place in the United States would have it. And make sure that you call that incident in and tell them that you have a problem on the crossing.
Do you know what to do if you're stuck on the railroad crossing? Get out of your vehicle. If a train is not approaching, find the blue and white emergency notification system sign on the traffic signs at the crossing. For help, call the number on the sign and give them the crossing number so they know your location and can alert train traffic. Remember, find the blue and white to save your life.
So we've been putting that out to the public. I think it's important for people in law enforcement and emergency response situations, DOT, all to be very aware of that number and to make sure that the citizens in their communities are learning about it. It is a relatively new sign, and we want the public to be aware of it so that if there is an emergency, we can prevent the crash from happening if we can get the information to the railroad ahead of time so that we don't have an incident. And if the train knows they have an incident 3 miles ahead, then they can prepare to stop and avoid those crashes. So we do remind the public of these crossing signs. We work, the railroad works with the DOT to have these installed. So the first ones you'll see are the advanced warning sign. You'll have your roadway pavement markings, and then of course a yellow double line, which indicates you are not to pass when you're approaching that intersection, just like any other intersection. You shouldn't be passing. And then we also have the cross buck, which is a regulatory sign. So a law enforcement officer can issue a ticket for someone not heeding to the train. But of course, we would want that law enforcement officer not to be following the person, but to be on the other side. And then we also have the stop bar that's painting at the crossing. And we want to make sure that people are stopping no closer than 15 feet and no further than 50. That's so important not to get too close to the tracks, but be close enough to be able to see down the tracks before proceeding. Then we have our active warning devices. More crashes actually happen where we do have these active warning devices than at passive crossings. So we want to make sure that people are aware that just because it's an active warning device does not mean they don't need to be very careful. You never want to proceed if you see these lights activated, or if there's a gate, you want to make sure you don't drive around that gate. It's so very important to make sure that you stay on the side of the gate and not drive around the gate. It is a 4-point violation to drive around those lower gates. And again, that's a high point because of the fact that you have a 12 million pound train possibly coming along the tracks. Many of you may remember the Highways or Dieways commercials, and so this is kind of like a throwback situation, but it's such a wonderful PSA reminding people about this topic.
You chose to follow others around the crossing. This is the next 60 seconds of your life.
Let's go. Come on, let's go. There's no train. Let's go. I'm going.
No. America's roads can be highways or dieways. The choice is yours.
And that's what we call follow the leader. It's where someone goes around the gates, but then another person goes behind them. And unfortunately, the first one might make it, but the second one would not. So we try to make sure people are aware you need to stop for those trains. Another sign that's very important for people to be aware of is the 3-track sign or 2-track sign. If it was a multiple track situation, it will tell you how many tracks there are, because common sense means then there could be, of course, that many trains. You don't want to pass at a crossing. You don't want to shift because you're more likely to stall when doing so, and then you don't want to get stopped on the track. And this is very important to make sure that you are pulling your vehicle all the way across the tracks to make sure that it clears on the other side by that 15 feet as well. We don't want anybody hanging out on the tracks behind them. And we have a campaign that's running, Rails and Recreation Do Not Mix. As the weather becomes better, people will be out camping, boating, doing recreations. We want to remind them to remember how long that trailer is that you're pulling and make sure it gets all the way across those tracks. Trains do overhang a little bit by 3 feet on each side, but then they can also have things that they're carrying. So that's why the 15 feet is so very important. Of course, it's illegal to walk on railroad tracks or recreate on railroad tracks. It's private property. It's not a sidewalk or shortcut. So please cross only at designated crossings. And as the weather gets better, we do see more and more people getting out along the railroads. And it's dangerous, but more important, we want to make sure everybody's very safe and going in the right locations. Hunting, fishing along railroad tracks, again, very dangerous. Can put yourself in a lot of risk if you're out on the tracks. Trains can be very quiet. You may not hear them. If you're operating an ATV, you certainly wouldn't hear the noise of the train approaching. So stay off those railroad tracks, out of tunnels and off of bridges. We do have an Operation Lifesaver volunteer program. We would love to have you join us. You can go to our website at www.oli.org and click the volunteer tab at the top. We will be having virtual versions of our final step, which used to be in person, but we're still doing virtual activities in June and July. So if you can get those applications in the next few weeks, we can get you in a class to become a volunteer and help us share this information to the citizens in your communities to try to prevent these crashes from happening. I will try to give the power back. Let's see. There, I think I did. So if there's any questions, of course, I'll be glad to answer them, and will be available via email anytime that you need any information, or if you want a program in your community, we would be glad to provide someone. And again, join our team. We would love to have you on board.
Fantastic. Great information, Janice. Thank you very, very much. I know when I took the rail crossing crash investigation class in the upstate, that the biggest thing that impressed me was the fact that, and you mentioned it, these trains do not have steering wheels. If you're on the tracks, you're at fault because the train cannot go around you. So that's something everybody needs to remember. So, and I know in our traffic incident management training, we promote the fact that there is a crossing number and a toll-free number at every crossing, and whatever the incident is that's on the tracks, people need to get a hold of the railway company as quick as possible, so we don't make a bad situation worse. So anyway, so that's great. Thank you very much. I think we got one really brief presentation coming up, and I guess it's me doing this presentation. That's what the slide says here anyway. So let's move on to the next slide. We've got an incident here. You can see in the right-hand lane. This is on I-75, and this is down in the state of Florida. Lots of traffic cones. That's pretty neat. We've got an incident on the right-hand shoulder, so we've got traffic merging from lane 3 into lanes 2 and 1. The problem we have here is somebody's maybe not working too closely with the media, and we need to get together with them. We need to include them in our training sessions, because you can see over in the other lanes, the northbound lanes, you can see a media vehicle is set up, and he's got a mast up and doing some live reporting. Look at the traffic queue building up behind that media unit. That's the key. Anybody else on that side is taking the problem that is on the southbound side and now adding a problem on the northbound side. Next slide, please. So you can see the buildup there. Again, is that media unit with the mast up. You can see the buildup of traffic. I mean, we're just creating a situation here where we're going to have secondary crashes, and the initial crash may only be a property damage crash. A secondary crash may be a fatality. We certainly do not want that to happen. Next slide, please. So we remove the media unit and look at the traffic flow on the other side. That's the key. So again, we need to make sure we work with the media, develop relationships with the media. I did that for many years. They're good people. They've got a job to do. They come out, they want to set up and get some information from us as to what's going on. We need to make sure that they're aware of the right place to go, the right things to do, how we do what we do, why we do it. These things are all very important, and if we're all playing off the same sheet of music, lots of safety there as well. Next slide, please. So expect them to arrive. They're going to arrive. Plan a media staging area. That's important. As I mentioned, they have a job to do and a boss to report to. If we don't give them, we don't have someone talking to the media, they'll find a story somewhere. They'll talk to a witness or two, somebody with a cell phone. I mean, things will get, stories will get changed. So they are good interviewers. They know how to talk to people and how to get some things for their story, some information for their story. So we need to make sure that we have a designated person that can take the time to talk to them and give them some good, solid information on what the incident is, what it's all about. That's very, very, very important. Next slide, please. They're going to use social media. We need to use social media. No question about that. Get a post out as quick as we can. Some agencies are great at this. Highway Patrol is good. And there are some other agencies in the state that use this very effectively. So we need to get the initial post out and then some regular follow-up posts, updated info. We can even advise them where they need to stage, who the PIO is, where the PIO is, where they need to go to meet with the PIO. If we don't have a designated PIO for every incident, then consider someone on that squad or on that unit or shift who can be authorized to act as a PIO. I know the Federal Emergency Management Division has basic PIO classes. They're great classes. I've been through them, and it's not a bad idea. Fire departments send battalion chiefs over if you want to do that. Law enforcement, if you can get someone on each squad or shift. I mean, if that's something you can do, or get one or two people, because one person's not always available. Get one or two or more people through that basic class so they have an understanding of how to handle this stuff. We need to make sure that we handle the flow of information properly and the tone of the story is as it should be. At and from the incident scene. And then, of course, the bottom bullet there, the absolute worst response is no comment. So we want to make sure that we don't do that. So if you have any questions about any of this stuff, again, we're going to have some information posted in just a second here that will give you our contact information. But first, let's make sure that you're aware that we are on Facebook, we are on Twitter. sctimnetwork.com is the key. If you want to know any of our training dates and locations or any of these upcoming meetings, go to sctimnetwork.com and you can get all that information, and you can participate in all of this stuff. Next and final slide, please. Ray Parker, who is with us this morning, glad that he could make it, is the SCDOT Traffic Incident Management Coordinator. They are the ones who are the coordinators and the sponsors of this program in the state of South Carolina, and we thank them very much for that. You can get a hold of Ray. You can see his contact information there. You can get a hold of me. My contact information is there with any questions that you might have, or if you want to schedule training or participate in any of these TIM team meetings, if you have some ideas in regards to future topics, or really anything related to traffic incident management, please reach out and get in touch with us. So Jeff Corbin, I don't know if you've got anything to add, but I think that pretty well wraps it up. And we are sitting right at an hour. Jeff, you go ahead.
That concludes today's program.
Okay, thank you, everybody. And again, any questions, get a hold of us and we'll get back to you as quickly as we possibly can. Stay safe.